Somewhere in your home there is a bag, a watch, or a pair of shoes you cannot bring yourself to look at anymore. You saved for it. You were proud of it. And sometime in the last year, that pride quietly turned into something closer to regret. You are not the only one feeling it. Across America in 2026, the wealthiest shoppers in the country are doing something nobody predicted. They are walking away from the exact labels they spent 2 decades chasing, and the reason has almost nothing to do with taste. Let me show you the number that started this whole conversation. Research firm Altient surveyed affluent and high net worth individuals and found that 20% of them intend to spend less on designer fashion over the next 12 months. That alone would be a footnote. The part that matters is the trend underneath it. Back in 2019, only 15% of wealthy buyers went an entire year without purchasing a single piece of designer fashion. That figure has climbed to 25%. For leather goods, the share of wealthy people buying nothing at all rose from 23% to 31%. For watches, 44% of them are sitting the year out entirely. These are not people who lost their money. These are people who kept their money and changed their minds. You can see the same story in the earnings reports. LVMH, the largest luxury group on the planet and the parent company of Louis Vuitton, Dior, Celine, and Fendi, reported that its fashion and leather goods division brought in 9.247 billion euros in the first quarter of 2026. A year earlier, that same division brought in 10.108 billion. Revenue fell 9% in a single year in the category that generates more than 2/3 of the group's profit. Kering, the parent company of Gucci and Saint Laurent, watched its sales fall 14.7% across 2025, a slide steep enough that it dropped behind Hermes in the industry rankings. So the money did not disappear. The behavior changed. And once you understand why the behavior changed, you will start seeing the same pattern inside your own bank account. Because the arithmetic that pushed wealthy shoppers out of those stores is running against your paycheck right now, just at a smaller scale. There are 6 forces driving this shift. Every one of them has a lesson attached that applies whether you have $11,000 sitting in a brokerage account or $1,100. Number 1, the price stopped matching the product. In 2010, a medium Chanel classic flat bag carried a retail price of $2,850. Expensive, certainly, but reachable for someone who saved deliberately for a year. On April 2nd of 2026, Chanel raised prices again across its core handbag lines, and that same medium classic flap now retails for $11,700. That is a 310% increase across 16 years. Run the compounding on that, and the bag appreciated at roughly 9.2% per year, every year, for 16 straight years. Understand what that means. A handbag outpaced the average return of the entire United States stock market across that stretch, not because the object got better, but because the company decided it should cost more. The leather did not improve. Stitching stayed exactly where it had always been. No factory relocated to a more expensive country. What moved was the number on the tag. And Chanel is not an outlier. The Business of Fashion and McKinsey published their State of Fashion report for 2026. And buried in it is one of the most revealing statistics in modern retail. Between 2023 and 2025, roughly 80% of all growth in the luxury market came from price increases rather than from selling more items. Read that again slowly. 4 out of every $5 of growth in one of the world's most profitable industries came from charging existing customers more, not from earning new ones. There is a name for a business model that grows only by raising prices on a shrinking group of loyal buyers. It is called harvesting. And harvesting works right up until the moment your best customers do the math. Resale did the math. She works in hospital administration in Ohio and had wanted a classic flap since she was 23 years old. This spring the cash was finally in hand. $11,700 saved deliberately across 4 years. She stood at the counter, asked the sales associate what the bag had cost in 2010, heard the answer, and walked out without buying anything. Not because she could not afford it, because she suddenly understood she was not paying for craftsmanship, she was paying for a pricing strategy. That $11,700 did not vanish. She moved it into a high-yield savings account paying 4.1%, which is roughly where the best accounts in the country sit as of this July. Left alone for 10 years at that rate, it grows to about $17,319. She earns $5,619 for doing absolutely nothing except leaving it where it is. Meanwhile, the national average savings rate across all American banks is 0.38%, according to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Same dollars, wildly different outcome, decided entirely by which building she put them in. Number 2, the middle of the market got pushed out and nobody came to replace them. For roughly 30 years, luxury brands ran on a specific engine. A small number of extremely wealthy clients bought the expensive things, and an enormous number of ordinary people with decent incomes bought the entry-level things: a wallet, a belt, a bottle of perfume, a small crossbody bag. Those aspirational buyers were the volume, and the volume paid for the stores, the advertising, and the fashion shows. That engine has broken. Bain & Company tracks this market every year, and their data shows that wealthy buyers are now expected to account for roughly 46 to 47% of all personal luxury spending worldwide. In 2019, that same group represented 30%. The share held by the wealthy grew by more than half in 7 years, and it did not grow because rich people started buying more. It grew because everyone else stopped. Analysts have started calling this the hourglass economy. Spending concentrates at the top, spending concentrates at the bottom, and the middle gets squeezed until it disappears. You can see it in your own life without reading a single research report. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York reported that total American household debt reached $18.8 trillion in the first quarter of 2026. Credit card balances sit at $1.25 trillion. Auto loans have climbed to $1.69 trillion. Student loans hold steady at $1.66 trillion. Researchers at the New York Fed put the split plainly when they released that report. High-income households held their spending steady through the spring. Lower-income families cut back, including on gasoline, while still reporting increased financial strain. A gallon of regular gas averaged $4.50 nationally in May, up from around $3.14 a year earlier, which is a 43% jump in a single line item nobody budgets for emotionally. When fuel and groceries absorb the flexible portion of a paycheck, the flexible portion is gone, and the discretionary purchase never gets considered at all. Those numbers describe a country where a large share of households have no room left for a discretionary $4,000 purchase, no matter how much they want one. And the brands noticed. They noticed years ago. Their response was to abandon the middle entirely and chase the top, which is exactly why prices kept climbing while store traffic kept falling. Here is the uncomfortable part for anyone who still shops those brands. When a company decides its future depends on its wealthiest 1% of clients, everyone below that line stops being a customer and becomes a source of margin. The prices are not calibrated to what you can comfortably pay. They are calibrated to what the wealthiest buyer will tolerate, and you are simply invited to stretch. Number 3, The signal broke. A luxury logo works as a signal for exactly one reason. Not everyone has it. The monogram on the bag communicates something because the person seeing it knows what the bag costs and knows what carrying it implies. That is the entire mechanism. Scarcity creates meaning, and meaning creates desire. Then the logo became ordinary. Payment plans made a $4,000 bag look like 4 monthly installments. Resale platforms flooded the market with authenticated pieces at half the price. Counterfeits improved to the point where the average person on the street cannot reliably tell the difference at 10 feet. Social media filled with hundreds of thousands of creators carrying the same 3 bags. By 2026, carrying a designer logo signals participation rather than distinction. It tells an observer you took part in mass luxury. That is a very different message than the one the buyer thought they were sending, and wealthy consumers noticed the change before anyone else did, because they were the ones losing the signal. Their response has been documented across every major industry analysis this year. Affluent buyers moved toward what the trade press calls stealth wealth, meaning garments and accessories with no visible branding at all, recognizable only to people who already know what they are looking at. Deloitte's Global Powers of Luxury report describes this as inconspicuous consumption, a horizontal signal aimed at peers rather than a vertical signal aimed at strangers. Morgan Stanley's head of European luxury brands research, Edouard Aubin, has flagged the next wrinkle. There are now signs of consumer fatigue with quiet luxury itself, which tells you something important about the whole game. The aesthetic keeps changing because the aesthetic was never the point. The point was staying one step ahead of whatever the crowd adopted, and that is a race with no finish line and a continuous entry fee. Malcolm learned this at 41. He spent 9 years buying a specific brand of watch, one every 18 months or so, because the watches announced a certain kind of professional arrival. Then he took a job at a firm where 3 of the 4 senior partners wore watches that cost under $400, and none of them noticed his. The signal he had spent roughly $30,000 building did not register in the room he had built it for. Whatever you are buying to be seen, someone in the room you are trying to enter has already stopped looking. Number 4. The wealthy moved their money toward things that pay them back. This is the shift that separates a spending trend from a wealth strategy, and it is the one worth studying most closely. Across 2026, spending on luxury experiences has consistently outpaced spending on luxury goods. Travel, dining, wellness, private events. At the same time, the goods that wealthy buyers still purchase have narrowed toward a specific category, the pieces that hold or increase value. Analysts describe this as an asset preservation mindset, and the resale data supports it. Rebag's 2025 value tracking found that the Hermes Kelly Mini II appreciated 282%, the Cellier Birkin 183%, and the Constance 137%. Now hold those figures next to the ordinary designer bag most shoppers actually buy, and the gap becomes brutal. Industry analysis of the resale market shows investment-grade leather goods recovering more than 70% of original retail. That word investment grade is doing enormous work in that sentence. It describes a narrow slice of pieces from a handful of houses in neutral colors in excellent condition. Outside that slice, recovery rates drop hard, and a bright seasonal color from a mid-tier label routinely returns a fraction of what was paid. Wealthy buyers understood this distinction first because they were the ones sitting on collections large enough to test it. A trend-driven piece in an unusual color loses value the moment the trend cools. A neutral classic from a house with strict supply control holds. So they stopped buying the first category almost entirely and concentrated on the second. which looks like restraint from the outside and functions like portfolio management from the inside. The brands themselves can read this in their own valuations. Kantar's brand tracking put Louis Vuitton's brand value at $87.5 billion in 2026, down from $112 billion the year before. That is a drop of more than 20% in 12 months, at a house that has spent decades building the single most recognizable monogram in the world. A brand does not shed $25 billion of perceived value because of a bad quarter. It sheds that when the story it tells about itself stops landing. Morgan Stanley cut its forecast for the personal luxury goods sector to roughly 2.5% growth in 2026, down from an earlier estimate of 4 to 5%. Bain & Company measured the global personal luxury goods market at 358 billion euros last year, down 2% at current exchange rates, with a projected recovery of 2 to 4% this year. Those are not collapse numbers. They are stagnation numbers in an industry that was compounding at double digits less than 5 years ago. And stagnation in a business built on desire is its own kind of verdict. Something else worth noticing sits inside those figures. Watches and jewelry grew 7% for LVMH in the first quarter of 2026 on the strength of Tiffany, while fashion and leather goods fell. The categories that hold value and get passed down are still moving. The categories that get carried, photographed, and replaced are the ones stalling. Buyers are drawing a line between an object that lasts and an object that performs, and they are choosing the first one. If you are finding this useful, subscribe and stick around, because the next section covers the financing trap sitting underneath most designer purchases in America. And it is the part almost nobody wants to talk about. Number 5, the resale market started telling the truth. The global luxury resale market was valued at roughly $37.95 billion in 2025 and is projected to reach $41.61 billion in 2026, growing at close to 10% annually. Handbags account for the largest share of it. Gen Z shoppers now report that roughly a third of their wardrobe is secondhand, rising to 45% for handbags specifically. A thriving resale market sounds like good news for owners, and in one narrow sense it is. What it really did, though, was end an illusion. For decades, nobody knew what a designer item was actually worth after purchase. There was no price discovery, no public record, no comparable sales. You paid the retail price, you carried the item, and the question of resale value stayed comfortably theoretical. Authenticated resale platforms destroyed that comfort. Now anyone can look up, in about 11 seconds, exactly what their $4,000 purchase from 3 years ago sells for today. For a small number of pieces, the answer is encouraging. For the vast majority, the answer is a number the owner does not want to see. Corinne found this out the practical way. She had accumulated 11 designer handbags over roughly a decade, spending a little over $26,000 in total. When she decided to sell 9 of them, the authenticated consignment offers came back totaling under $9,000 before platform fees. 2 bags had held their value beautifully. The other 7 had quietly lost most of theirs while sitting in a closet, insured, dust-bagged, and barely used. She had not been careless. She had bought carefully, cleaned them properly, kept every receipt and box. The pieces simply were not the kind that hold, and there was no way to know that at the register because nobody at the register has any incentive to tell you. Transparency is what killed the aspirational luxury market. Once buyers could see the depreciation curve, the purchase stopped feeling like an investment and started feeling like what it always was, which is consumption. Number 6, the financing underneath it all stopped hiding. Here is where this stops being a story about rich people and starts being a story about your household budget. The average annual percentage rate on American credit cards accruing interest reached 22.15% in the second quarter of 2026, up from 21.52% the previous quarter, according to Federal Reserve data. That is close to the highest borrowing cost American consumers have faced in 4 decades. Run one purchase through that rate. A $5,000 bag charged to a card at 22.15%, paid down at a disciplined $150 every single month, takes 53 months to clear. That is 4 years and 5 months of payments, and it costs $2,834 in interest. Total damage: $7,834 for a $5,000 item, assuming you never miss a payment and never add another charge to the card. Now run the same purchase at a 2% minimum payment, which is what the statement actually suggests. The balance takes over 80 years to clear and generates more than $47,000 in interest. That is not a typo. Minimum payments on high-interest debt are designed to keep you paying, and a luxury purchase financed that way outlives the item, the trend, and possibly the buyer. Then there is the newer trap. LendingTree's 2026 Buy Now, Pay Later report found that 47% of Buy Now, Pay Later users have paid late on one of those loans in the past year. That is up 6 percentage points from 2025 and 13 points from 2 years earlier. More users are now carrying 3 or more of these loans simultaneously. More than half of users said they would struggle to make ends meet without them. Clothing and fashion accessories remain one of the largest spending categories on these platforms, reported by roughly 41% of users. Split payments feel like a discount. They are not. 4 payments of $250 is $1,000, and the reason the format works so well for retailers is that it detaches the purchase from the price. Your brain evaluates the installment, your bank account absorbs the total. Hollis worked this out after a rough December. He had 4 active Buy Now Pay Later plans running at once, none of them large, all of them for clothing. Individually, each looked harmless. Together, they consumed $480 a month, which was more than his car payment, for items he had already worn and in 2 cases already replaced. That $480 is where the entire story turns, so sit with it for a second. Take $400 a month, the amount an average designer habit quietly consumes, and route it into a low-cost index fund instead. At an 8% average annual return, which sits below the long-run historical average of the American stock market, that becomes roughly $73,178 after 10 years, on $48,000 of actual contributions. Leave it 20 years, and it reaches about $235,608 on $96,000 contributed. 30 years takes it near $596,000. Nobody sees that account. Nobody compliments it. It will never sit on a restaurant table where someone can admire it. And it is the difference between working because you choose to at 60 and working because you have to. So what are wealthy Americans actually doing with the money that used to go toward designer goods? 3 things. Consistently, and none of them are complicated. They moved cash into accounts that pay. The best high-yield savings accounts in the country are paying between 4.1 and 4.5% as of this month, while the national average across all banks sits at 0.38%. On a $12,000 emergency fund, that difference is roughly $450 a year earned passively for the effort of one online application. Inflation measured 2.7% in the most recent Consumer Price Index reading, which means a good savings account is currently preserving purchasing power while the average one is quietly destroying it. They shifted consumption toward experiences and durability. This one is often misunderstood as a personality change. It is closer to a value calculation. A trip generates memory and relationship value that does not depreciate on a resale platform. A well-made coat worn for 15 years costs less per wear than a trend piece replaced every second season, even when the sticker price is 4 times higher. They stopped buying anything they could not answer 4 questions about. This is the part you can copy today, and it costs nothing. Question 1. What is the cost per wear? Divide the price by the realistic number of times the item gets used. A $1,200 coat worn 200 times across 5 winters costs $6 per wear. A $300 bag carried 4 times costs $75 per wear. The expensive item is frequently the cheaper one, and the sticker price hides that completely. Question 2. What does this sell for in 3 years? Look it up before buying, not after. 11 seconds on any authenticated resale platform will tell you whether you are buying an asset, a durable good, or a rapidly depreciating one. All 3 can be reasonable purchases. Confusing them is what causes the damage. Question 3. Would I still want this if nobody ever saw me with it? Sit with the honest answer. Wanting to be perceived a certain way is human, and there is no shame in it, but a purchase driven entirely by that motive delivers a return that fades in roughly 2 weeks, which is how long it takes for a new possession to become invisible to the people around you. Question 4. What am I not buying by buying this? Every dollar has an alternative use. $400 a month is a designer habit, or it is retirement contributions, or it is the emergency fund that keeps a job loss from becoming a credit card balance. The money always goes somewhere. The only real question is whether you chose the destination. Blair applied all 4 questions for 1 calendar year, tracked every purchase she declined, and moved the difference into a brokerage account automatically on the 15th of every month. The total came to $5,200 over 12 months. She describes the year as the first time she felt wealthy, which is worth noticing because she had a smaller wardrobe at the end of it than at the start. That is the mechanism underneath the entire shift you have been watching in 2026. Wealthy Americans did not develop better taste. They ran the arithmetic on status and found the return was negative, and they had enough financial literacy to act on what they found. The bag that cost $2,850 in 2010 and $11,700 today did not become 3 times better. It became 3 times more expensive, and somebody eventually noticed that the person profiting from that change was never the person carrying it. You are allowed to buy beautiful things. Buy the coat you will wear for 15 years. Buy the piece that carries actual meaning for you. What is worth abandoning is the version of spending where the audience decides, because that audience is not paying your bills, is not funding your retirement, and stopped looking a long time ago. The money lessons behind all of this, the ones that make this kind of thinking automatic rather than effortful, are the ones schools never taught any of us. I broke those down completely in another video, and it pairs with this one closely. Before that, though, I want to hear from you. Have you bought something expensive that you later regretted? And what finally made you see it clearly? Or did you go the other direction and buy something costly that turned out to be worth every dollar years later? Tell me what it was and what it taught you. Somebody reading your comment is standing in a store right now with their card out trying to decide, and your experience might be the thing that reaches them.